Good afternoon. My name is Joni Whiting, and I appreciate the opportunity to tell my story. However, I want to be clear from the outset. There's nothing being done here in this room today that will benefit my family or me. There is nothing you can give to ease our pain. I will suffer for the rest of my life for what I have lost. I am here today only to tell you about a woman I loved and lost 11 years ago. I ask only that you listen to her story, to walk just briefly in her shoes and mine. My daughter Stephanie was a wife, a loving mother of 3, and a beloved employee of Dart Distributing. Stephanie had a unique and beautiful voice, the voice of an angel. Stephanie was sweet and a gentle woman, the kindest human being I have ever known. In June of 2000, at 24 years of age, Stephanie was diagnosed with melanoma skin cancer on her face. A mole had gone bad during her 3rd pregnancy. The next 2 years were filled with experimental therapies and endless surgeries as they cut her face off 1 inch at a time until there was nothing left to cut. The skin grafts had failed. There was nothing to cover the hole in her face. All but 4 of her teeth had been removed due to the side effects of her chemotherapy. It was difficult for her to eat. The nausea was so severe that the medications gave her little to any relief. A doctor at the hospital pulled me aside and told me she may get some relief from smoking marijuana. But that wasn't an acceptable option for me or her being drug-free. In addition, the legal ramifications associated with illegal use was frightening. After her 10th surgery, all efforts to save her life had failed, and her oncologist predicted that she had about 6 months to live. At that time, I estimate she was taking approximately 40 to 50 tablets of OxyContin and 30 to 40 tablets of roxicodone per day. A consequence of the long-term use of pharmaceutical opiates was the ever-increasing amount needed to give her relief. Yet her pain was still evident in her every breath and in her every movement. Her whole body was racked with continuous and uncontrollable pain, and her tumors continued to grow. There was nothing to stop it, nothing to slow it down, and the hope of a miracle faded as my child bravely began to make plans for the ending of her life. When Zofran, the anti-nausea drug, continued to give her no relief, Stephanie began to lose weight. We asked her doctor to prescribe Marinol, a synthetic version of THC, one of the active chemical compounds in marijuana. But even taking this in pill form didn't abate any of her symptoms, and she stopped taking it because it didn't work. As her tumors grew larger, it became more and more difficult for her to eat. They were growing inside and outside of her mouth, her throat, and her chest. My other adult children begged me to let her use marijuana, and when I refused, they took her out of my home. When she came back 3 days later, Stephanie told me she'd gotten hungry after using it, and that the marijuana had kicked up her appetite, as well as allowed her to keep the food down. She had eaten 3 meals a day at a time when she'd routinely eaten nothing for days. She had just a touch of energy back, and she looked better than I had seen her in months. For reasons I don't know, marijuana also enhanced the effects of Stephanie's pain medication and didn't make her appear high. My only regret is not allowing her to use marijuana in my home throughout her illness. The fear of being caught was significant, but desperate. I called a number of family members and friends of our family and asked if they knew anywhere we could purchase marijuana. The next morning, someone had placed a package of it on our doorstep. I have never known whom to thank for it, but I remain grateful beyond belief. I was prepared to defend my daughter's use to anyone who asked. In retrospect, I can tell you with conviction that I would have no problem going to jail for acquiring marijuana for my suffering child. The law is unjust, and I would rather spend the rest of my life in prison than have denied her the marijuana that kept her pain at bay and allowed her to live 89 more days by simply being able to eat. Martin Luther King Jr. once said, quote, "I submit that an individual who breaks a law that conscience tells him is unjust and who willingly accepts the penalty of imprisonment in order to arouse the consciousness of the community over its injustice is in reality expressing the highest respect for the law," unquote. I am here today to tell you that I am no longer willing to support making criminals out of the sick and dying. I saw with my own eyes that medicine marijuana worked. I have dedicated a large portion of my own life to helping support people to stay clean and drug-free, and I see no contradiction in this at all. My daughter was able to eat for nearly 3 more months because of marijuana. I allowed her to use it in my home before meals because it worked and because every day of her life was precious to her and her 3 small children. We had Thanksgiving and Christmas with her at the table that year. Having her there was priceless. Shortly after the new year, Stephanie was placed on 24-hour nursing care and could no longer use marijuana. Her pain was so severe that when she asked my husband and me to lay down beside her and hold her, she couldn't stand the pain of us touching her. Her hospice nurses were so disturbed by the severity of her pain. They, doctor, finally used IV lidocaine and numbed her whole body. The morphine, even at the strongest dose allowed by law, wasn't giving her any relief. On January 14th, 2003, at 1:30 in the morning, with her beloved children sleeping in their beds in other rooms, Stephanie stopped breathing, and 3 minutes later, her strong heart ceased to beat. She died in the room she grew up in, holding my hand. She was 26 years old. They say there is no greater loss than that of a parent, of a child for a parent. They're right. For this government to deny those who need marijuana as medicine to lessen the severity of their pain, nausea, and seizures is unjustifiable. For this government to incarcerate the sick and dying and their loved ones for using or acquiring marijuana to use as medicine is unconscionable. For this government to seize their property, vehicles, and assets for having to acquire marijuana illegally for medical purposes is an abomination of justice. I'm a Vietnam veteran, and my youngest son has recently returned to Minnesota after serving 2 tours in Iraq. We are a family that honors this country, having served it in the military in every conflict since the Revolutionary War. I don't use drugs. I don't abuse alcohol. I didn't want to break the law, but I would gladly do so again if I ever had to. I've raised 4 of my own children and 2 of Stephanie's. I'm currently raising the last child my daughter had to leave behind. What would you have done had you been in my shoes? Could you sleep at night with your child screaming in pain? What price would you be willing to pay to relieve the suffering of someone you love? The fact is, you can't do anything for me, but there are so many others in similar situations right here, now in Minnesota. They deserve compassion, dignity, and you fighting for them. You can provide some amount of relief to them by passing this bill. I am not asking you to pass this. I am begging you for every decent family that are currently walking in my shoes. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Ms. Whiting, and it's really not hard, I think, for anybody listening to you to imagine themselves in your situation, and we really appreciate your sharing with us today.
Thank you very much.
Are there questions, members? Okay, not seeing any. Thank you so much.
Thank you.